What's up guys, it's Nathan here. A lot of customers ask me, is the building and pest report necessary if they're buying their first home? Today, I'm going to provide a comprehensive guide and everything you need to know about a building and pest report, including how to renegotiate your purchase price once the report comes back, and the exact process you need to take to get the most out of the building and pest inspection. I wanted to start off with my own story. When I was looking for a first home, I spent about 18 months looking at houses, townhouses, and after a very long time of searching, I came across a unit I really liked. I went through the property and fell in love with it. It was perfect, so naturally, I made an offer. Luckily enough, I secured it. Now, at the time of making the offer, I debated whether or not I put a building and pest clause in the contract. After all, the property I was looking at was double brick and built in the 70s, and I thought there wasn't really much to it. Luckily, the solicitor I was using convinced me to add a 14-day building and pest clause into the contract of sale to protect me. This solicitor was brilliant and gave me a lot of good advice. They said, make sure you get a building and pest inspection that's thorough, as you don't want to end up getting lumped with extra costs and repairs once you own the property. They also said, go to the building and pest inspection when they do it, which I did. When I called the agent to arrange the building and pest inspection, the agent actually tried to bully me out of going. He said that everything's going to be okay and not to worry, he'll go through it with them, and that he had everything sorted, there was no need for me to go. Well, I made sure I went, and I'm glad I did. On the day of the building and pest inspection, I went through the property with the inspectors, and they found routine issues that you'd expect from a property that was built in the 70s. The inspectors were really friendly, and it wasn't until we went outside where we found the major issue. There was a big tree stump in the backyard, and the roots of the tree stump were going under the foundation. As the tree had been removed, these roots were shrinking, which would cause the foundation to sink in the future. The building inspector said to me on the quiet that he'd recommend avoiding this property, as there'd likely be additional costs to fix this in the future. Now, this inspection saved me thousands of dollars, particularly in special levies that might have been needed to fix this foundation problem in the future. You might be thinking, how much does this building and pest inspection cost? Well, not a lot in comparison to what the costs and issues you might find. And in my case, where I decided not to proceed with a purchase, it actually saved me thousands of dollars. A typical building and pest inspection ranges from anywhere from $500 to $1,000, depending on the size of your property and the location. I'm going to go through the exact process to follow so you make sure you don't make any mistakes. There are a few reasons why building and pest reports are important. The first is to understand any maintenance that you might need to do to the property. The second is to identify any repairs that the seller might need to do before the settlement takes place. And the last gives you an opportunity to renegotiate with the vendor, whether you want to change some terms, change your purchase price, or anything else. It gives you that chance to go back. Typically, when you arrange a building and pest inspection, you'll usually have the building inspector, the pest inspector, and the agent turn up on the day. As I mentioned earlier in my previous story, you want to make sure you are there on the day as well during the inspection. I can't stress this enough. You want to make sure you understand what's going on. In a lot of the cases, the reports you get from these inspectors have so many caveats, so many liability waivers, that you don't get the full grasp of what's actually going on. When you're belly to belly with the building and pest inspection, you can actually ask them tough hitting questions to make sure you understand the severity of any issues. The other thing I'd recommend with the building and pest inspectors is, if you talk to them or have any conversations, you want to be out of earshot of the agent. This is where you don't want the agent getting involved, making things awkward and trying to convince you otherwise that you should continue with the purchase. On the flip side, if the building and pest is saying the property is all great, it's all looking good, you don't want the agent using that if you ever go back and try to renegotiate on something and say, oh, the building and pest said everything was great. I'd recommend, if you're having a chat with the building and pest inspector, try and do it in private and away from the agent. It's also worth having a chat with the inspectors before the inspection and asking them to keep any information about the property to themselves. Sometimes the agents will actually ask the building inspectors how the inspection has gone. If the inspector says all good, well, once again, this is something that could go against you when you try and renegotiate in the future, because the agent can say, well, the inspector said everything was fine. Now you're actually picking fault. We don't think this is a fair point to renegotiate on. What should you bring to the inspection? Well, there's a few things you should bring. You should bring your phone, a measuring tape, and a notepad. The phone to take pictures. You want to take as many pictures as possible, get an understanding of what's going on. Now, the building and pest inspectors will take pictures on their own, but once again, you want to remember what's going on and what's happening. A tape measure to measure things. So once again, when you're going through the property, you might want to know how much space is there in the fridge cavity, or where you're going to put your dry cleaner, and having a notepad where you can take those measurements and note it down will allow you to remember all these things once you leave the property. And the last thing you want to bring is a phone charger or some sort of a light where you can test all the power sockets to make sure the power's working. In a lot of cases, the inspectors are going to check, but remembering there's a lot of things to check in a property. They might miss one or two things, and by you going there and checking it out yourself means that you're going to cover every single base more thoroughly. We've talked about building and pest inspectors. A lot of people don't realize you can actually do an electrical inspection as well. There's one that has a highest chance of fault. For example, in a property, electrical items quite often are the most expensive to fix. Especially if there's solar panels, you want to check their capacity and a bunch of other things that the electrical inspector will be able to do for you. The same thing goes if there's a pool. It's recommended to get the pool inspection done. That's where they'll check the filters, the pumps, and make sure everything's compliant. When arranging all these professions, you want to make sure they're happening all on the same day at the same time, so you can be there, like I talked about earlier, hearing from the horse's mouth exactly what's going on, and they can actually show you the issues when you're there. Depending on which state you're in, typically you can add a building and pest clause in the contract. Let's say you've got 2 weeks building and pest inspection clause. What you generally want to do is arrange the building and pest inspection in the first week. Most of the reports come back within 24 or 48 hours after the inspection's taken place, which gives you another week to digest the issues, go back and renegotiate, and potentially get things completed or fixed, and even quotes done if required. Now, we've got an inspection checklist on our website. We'll leave a link below, and this will help you with understanding the things you need to check when you go through a property. If you're anything like me, when I went through my first open home, I had no idea. I walked through in one door, out one door. I didn't even think to check things like light sockets, check if the water faucets are working, the cabinetry, check under the sinks. I had no idea to check all these sort of things. It's highly recommended to do so. If you've missed it in your initial inspection, this is where going to the building and pest inspection will help. You can do those additional checks and not feel rushed because you've got the property down on a contract. You can go through it slowly but surely and make sure everything checks out. Some common things you want to look for. Once again, the building and pest inspectors are going to look for this, but it's worth checking yourself. The first is water damage, both inside and outside the property. Check for any undulations, look at the fences and retaining walls. Go through each room, check if they have air conditioning, fans, windows with locks. Make note of this. It's good to know what room has what, so you know what's sort of going on, and check that they all work. Switch them on, switch them off. You want to be checking for dampness, especially in bathrooms or any mold on wall. If there's an alarm, check the sensors working and find out where the alarm system is. If there's couches on walls or rugs on grounds, move them, check under them, check that there's been no damage behind or under them. With any open doors, check that they're closed and open properly. When you're looking at the walls, check for any bubbling because there might be some water issues if that's happening. Find out where the NBN box is and check for phone reception throughout the place. In the kitchen, turn on the dishwasher and check under the counters and sinks to make sure there's no leakage. Check the igniters on gas stoves and the range hoods to make sure they're working. Flush all toilets and see how quickly the water comes back. Once again, most of the time the inspectors will do all this, but it doesn't hurt for you to do it as well. As we talked about earlier, if you've got your phone charger, plug that in and check it works in all the PowerPoint. A question I get asked a lot is how liable are the inspectors? Well, when you receive a building and pest report, you'll receive pages and pages of terms and conditions which stipulates it's a visual inspection only, and voiding all guarantee of its accuracy and no liability shall be accepted. In simple terms, the inspectors aren't liable. Once again, it's just about identifying the blatantly obvious problems that might be inherent with the property before you proceed with locking in the purchase. Now, how long do these inspections take? They'll typically take anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes. You'll need to arrange a building inspection. As we talked about earlier, you want to make sure you're there in the inspection. A lot of times when you read the reports, there's a lot of caveats, there's a lot of disclaimers in there. And when you're there and asking questions directly with the building and pest inspectors, you get a bit of a better idea, better context of what's actually going on. One of the questions I like to ask the inspectors is, would you buy this property? If you were me and you were in my situation, would you actually go ahead with this purchase? Or are there too many red flags here that give you concerns that it's going to be costly to fix this property? Now, if you're buying a new property, you're probably asking yourself the question at this stage, should I do a building and pest inspection for a new property off the plan or a property that's recently been built? Now, it's generally not needed to do a building and pest report for a brand new built property. Rather, it's recommended to get a defect report or a handover inspection report completed. It's specifically designed to identify any defects in the quality or workmanship as well well as imperfections in the property. Now, prices for these reports range from anywhere from $400 to $800, but once again, it's highly worthwhile checking out and doing, especially if you pick up one issue, you can get it rectified before handover is completed. Once the building and pest inspection is completed, the report is generally emailed to you within 24 to 48 hours after the actual day that they've inspected the property. Keep in mind, this report does not go to the seller, does not go to the real estate agent. So it's a copy that you have. You can run through it yourself. If you have any issues, you can go back to your solicitor and renegotiate on those points where they'll go through the solicitors and talk to each other. Going through the real estate agent is probably not wise at this point. You want to go through your solicitor who will look after you from a legal perspective. The building inspection report will cover things like significant defects or problems such as rising damp, movement in the walls such as cracking, safety hazards, or a faulty roof if they can get up on the roof. If you're purchasing a property at auction, you would need to complete this report prior, because when you buy at auction, you're unconditionally locked in. So if you did a report after you've purchased a property, there's nothing you can do. You can't renegotiate. The property is locked in and you've really got no right to renegotiate. So once again, if you found a property, go on auction, you want to do these steps prior and make an informed decision before you put your hand up, because you'll know what sort of costs are involved and you can factor that into the price that you'd be willing to pay. Once the report is back, a lot of people ask, can I renegotiate on the purchase price after the building and pest report has come in? You most certainly can. Once again, it's about communicating this through your solicitor. If you talk to the real estate agent, a lot of times they might try and bully you out of it. They might try and talk you out of all these concerns you have and say that it's perfectly normal. Or they might even say they've got other people willing to buy the property and that if you don't buy it at this price, you're going to lose out. Going through the solicitor, they'll be able to communicate all your requests and put it in writing and make sure it's a condition as per settlement. So if you want to renegotiate and reduce the price because you got $5,000 of works to the properties or termite mesh you need to do, well, they can put that through to the vendor and the vendor will ultimately make the decision whether they'll accept that or say no, like it or lump it. You can absolutely renegotiate on the price. You can renegotiate on anything you want done prior to the settlement taking place. It's all up for grabs. Just be open and transparent with your solicitor. They'll take care of you here. They'll make sure it's all done through the appropriate path. Is a building and pest inspection compulsory, and does the bank need a copy of it? In a lot of states, it's not compulsory. It's something that is buyer's obligation. So if you do want to do this, it would be highly recommended that you arrange it for $500 or $1,000 or whatever it costs. It's a little bit of peace of mind, but if you find something that's huge or detrimental or going to cost you thousands of dollars once you own the property, it's really a low cost in the grand scheme of things. It's also not a requirement of the bank. The bank expects the buyers to do their own due diligence, and building and pest is one of them, but there's no obligation here. So the bank doesn't actually ask for a copy of the building and pest report. They just think that this will be a due diligence taken on by the buyer themselves. There's absolutely no obligation by the bank for you to do this, but once again, it is highly recommended, and for a few $100s, if you find a big problem, it could save you thousands of dollars down the track. If you're looking to buy a property, it's recommended to organize a building and pest inspection. It saved me thousands of dollars in my own situation, and when you organize one, remember the steps we talked about earlier. Turn up to the building and pest inspection, follow the checklist we have. If there are problems with the property, it's not all over. You are well within your right to renegotiate with the seller, whereby you can have them fix it or reduce the purchase price you've paid for it. Thanks for watching, guys. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already done so. And here at Hunter Galloway, we're mortgage brokers and help people right across Australia. So if you need assistance, hit us up at huntergalloway.com.au or call us on 1300 088 065, and we'll see you next time.